here today with Miss Gloria Etheredge, and we are just excited that she is with us today. So, Miss Gloria, would you like to start with maybe the high school or when you were younger than being in high school? Just tell us your story.
I went to high school at North Panola High School, Como, Mississippi. At that time, all of us who lived in Sardis, Mississippi, Crenshaw, in that area, we had to be bused, actually, to Como, North Panola High School. So that's how I ended up graduating from North Panola in Como, Mississippi. At Como, I was fortunate enough to become the queen of Miss North Panola during my junior year at North Panola, which was an interesting experience. It was one that really took me out of my comfort zone because then I had to be more of a public person than one that just walked around on campus. During my senior year, we were all of us seniors were looking for a job, where we were going to go, what we're going to do. And my guidance counselor advised me to take an interview with the airlines. I'd never thought about the airlines, wasn't familiar with flying on airplanes or anything like that. But it sounded exciting, sounded interesting, sounded different, because most of the people I knew were either teachers or, basically in the teaching field. And I figured, well, I know there must be something else I can do. So that was a great opportunity for me to extend myself a little bit. So anyway, there were 3 airlines, major airlines, that were recruiting at my school. It was Eastern, which is now out of existence. It was American, and there was United. So my counselor told me to take an interview with all 3. And I did, and I was accepted with United, and this was in 1968. So after being accepted with United and graduating college, I was sent off to United's training school for flight attendants. So they sent me a ticket, and I took my airplane ride up from Memphis to Chicago, where the training center was. I went into training, United's training school, for flight attendants, which was in Des Plaines, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. And after training, after the 4 weeks of intensive training for all phases of in-flight, that we were in-flight employees, we graduated, and we were given a choice of places we'd like to go to be, we call it based, and that's where we would stay, and we had to stay there for 2 years before we could change our base to another city. I was in New York for 2 years, and of course I took advantage of some of the things that were available in New York. It's like, for one thing, I went to modeling school, and that was, I think, the first black modeling school in that area anyway, called Ophelia DeVore Modeling School. So I went there, and I was able to get some real knowledge about the modeling industry, and well, just the inside of modeling that you don't get when you just see the models come out on the runway. But there's a lot of backstories to learning about modeling. My job offered me, United offered me the opportunity to go to any base they have, and bases were all over the United States, the 10 bases or 8 bases that we had at that time, and I could go to any of them that had openings. So I decided, well, I think I want to live in Los Angeles. For one reason is that when I would have flights to Los Angeles, the city was so beautiful with the lights. It just looked so crystal, like jewels. And I said, well, I think that looks like an exciting city. And I was young. So the excitement and the thought of living in Los Angeles really did appeal to me. So I said, I'm going to put my request in to transfer to Los Angeles. And that I did. And I moved out to Los Angeles and got an apartment there. And that's where I got my first car. Because in Los Angeles, you have to have a car. Everything's so spread out. You have to have a car. So I got my first car while living in Los Angeles. I noticed some discrimination. This was in Salt Lake City. My flying partners, we would do things together. So they all wanted to go hear the Mormon Tabernacle, a very, famous choir at the Roman Tabernacle Church and the Roman Tabernacle Choir, very well known. So he said, oh, let's go hear the Roman Tabernacle Choir. So I had never heard them, didn't know much about them either. So I was with the group, and we went to the tabernacle, and we were stopped at the door, and I said, well, I didn't think anything of it because, well, I just never thought about discrimination or anything. So one of the flight attendants came back to me and said, oh, we can't go in. It's just not allowed to go in. And I said, well, why can we can't go in? She said, well, she never would tell me why. She just said, no, they won't let us in. And I later learned that we were not being let in because I was with the group, and no Black people were allowed. They didn't want to hurt my feelings, and they wanted to just, protect my feelings, say, no, we're not going in because you're with us. And then that would make me feel bad because they couldn't endure it because I was with them. Mm-hmm. So they never really would explain to me why we were not admitted. But later, I was able to find out why they did not admit us in there. While I was in Los Angeles, I decided that I wanted to travel outside of the country. So I, along with a couple of the flight attendants, decided we would take a trip together. And we did. We went to Paris and also to Rome. And so that was a great experience for me, being outside of the country and seeing what it was like, listening to the language, so that was really broadened my horizon. However, later United became an international carrier, so we added some international cities. The first one that I was able to take was to Hawaii. At that time, it was part of our international base. So I had several flights to Hawaii, and I thought that was really, it's a beautiful place. It was exciting. So Hawaii was one of the places that I would fly. And so that was just so much to broaden my horizon. Coming from a small town in Mississippi, I didn't have these experiences. Mm-hmm. And had I not had this job, I don't think I would have probably ever had the experiences that I did. But I was fortunate enough to get the job and to stay with the job, and it was demanding, and it caused me to actually grow up really fast because when I say that, it's being reliable, because coming from home and coming right into Tennessee State and then right with the United, I had to learn how to be reliable, that my employer could rely on me, and I was always slow, and I'd come in late, but I couldn't do that with my job. I found out early that I had to be on time, and so there was a lot of growing up to do, and I had to do that.
Miss Gloria, like you have had such an exciting life in the airline industry, and it's made you a mature person. So what, I don't know if I told you I was going to ask you this, what has been the most exciting part, you think, about your career?
Well, I consider it very exciting for me to visit other countries and other cultures. Going to Japan, it's a different culture. China, it's a different culture. Philippines, a different culture. And other cities that each one was different and unique in itself. So it was such a learning experience. And I enjoyed hearing the different languages from the different countries, and other things that we love to do, like shopping in different countries. So all of that, I think that exposure was one thing that I would consider that propelled me forward and expanded my horizon more, because I would not have had an opportunity to meet people from other countries in that sense. While I was in Los Angeles, I got a call from my future husband, and because we had been friends and engaged while I was in college. It's where we met at Tennessee State. So, but we went our separate ways after I finished, and he went into the service. He was drafted to go into the military, so he went in the Army for 2 years. And I pursued my life because we were no longer together. Say we had broken our engagement, so we were going our separate ways. And when he finished with the military, he came to Memphis and started coaching at high school here in Memphis, and this is where he was residing when we got back together. He gave me a call right out of the blue. I think he got my number from my mother, who always liked him anyway, thought he was a good guy. So he called me out of the blue, and we talked, and we kind of got together and decided we would get married. So my living in Los Angeles and he in Memphis, that didn't kind of work out too good. We knew that had to change. So he convinced me to move to Memphis. So after 4 years of marriage, we had our first child. Her name is Tiffany. And but there was kind of a problem there. I had a child, but I worked. My base was Chicago. I worked in Chicago, and I wasn't home every day. Then I thought, well, how can I work out of Chicago and live in Memphis? And so, I gave this great consideration and prayer, and the thought came to me, well, you can work it out where you can go to Chicago for your flights, and after your flights, you can come back to Memphis, for your family. And that's what I was able to work out, and that I was able to work that out by using my privileges on some of the other airlines that did fly to Chicago, like Delta, and there was Southern, which is no longer existing now. And basically, Southern and Delta had flights to Chicago. So I would choose flights around the departure of my trip in Chicago. So when I would get to Chicago, I would be able to, get my flight. And once my flights were over, usually starting out at that time, I was going 3 days at a time. I was flying 3 on, we call it 3 on, and 5 off. That was the schedule. I have 3 days of flying and I have 5 days off, and it was just that sequence throughout the month. And I started that. I would get my ticket on Delta or Southern, whichever, and I'd go up to Chicago as a passenger. And then I'd go over to United and, get my flight. Sometimes I'd have to sit for a while before my flight was actually leaving, but I was able to to arrange to get my flight. You know, that was the main thing, getting my flight. So I did that for a number of years. Actually, I commuted until I quit, and I stayed with airlines for 40-some years. So I commuted the whole time. I had never lived at a base in a city where there was a base. I've always had to commute. And commuting from Memphis, because I had been flying for 4 years when I got married. So from that time on until the time I retired, I was commuting back and forth. And it worked out. It worked out for me. And I was just very, very fortunate that I was able to do that, because I felt that the job was for me. I felt that the Lord had put me in a position for the job. And if that was the case, then He would work it out for me to keep it.
Well, sounds interesting. You've, as they say, you've done well, you've lived well, and you've raised your little one to, you know, be grown and mature and blessed. So just on behalf of the staff of Jules and all of our teachers who work with us, and our readers, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us, because I believe some other people are going to be blessed to read about your story, okay?
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Gloria.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for asking me.
We appreciate it more than you really know, okay? Until next time, we'll talk again, but thank you again.
You're welcome.